thanks for joining us and welcome to this webinar, Adelante, a renewed focus for Spain. I'm Andrew Catchpole, editor of Harper's Wine and Spirit, and I'm joined by a fantastic panel today, and I'll be asking them all to introduce themselves in just a short while. Although I'm sure many of you out there most of you out there will know all of their faces already. Right, why Adelante? Well, the word roughly translates as ahead, as in looking ahead, which seems pretty apt given that spring has arrived with a double dose of optimism. And this is also the opening webinar for Wines from Spain's digital events program this year, which is taking place for obvious reasons instead of the annual Wines from Spain tasting in London. If you haven't already, do check out the Food and Wines from Spain website, where you'll find details for another 9 webinars scheduled between now and June, and also 2 digital tastings planned, an exporters tasting and an importers tasting. Again, with all details on the Foods and Wines from Spain website. So back to today. The idea for this opening webinar is to discuss how Spain is performing in the UK and what it can do to build upon the momentum that was there, I think it's fair to say, up to the end of 2019, as the pandemic recedes. So where Spain goes from here. First up, and most importantly, I'm going to introduce the panel, or allow you to introduce yourselves. Sumi, you're top left in my screen. Could we kick off with you? Just a couple of words about what your role is in the wine world as well.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Harper team and Andrew. Sumi is my name. I'm a wine journalist, communications consultant, and an educator. I do have a wide variety of roles that I perform on an independent basis, but pretty much work with private clients on fine wine portfolio management, handling their allocations, buying, sourcing decisions. Apart from that, I work with some producers, predominantly European, to help execute their communications, PR, marketing objectives. I'm also a Master of Wine student, and I have worked in the communication stream and the wine trade for a number of years, focusing predominantly on podcasts. I've been a radio wine producer, I've had my own wine show as well. I've also done many videos, online videos and content to pretty much reach out to a wide sector of the customer base, novices as well as educated palate, predominantly to break down wine, break the jargons, keep it accessible, friendly, and emerging markets is my niche. I'm an Indian by origin. Finally, I'm a chartered accountant by qualification. So I'm the treasurer for Circle of Wine Writers, which is a not-for-profit organization that brings together some of the industry's key writers, journalists, educators, broadcasters together. So yeah, pretty much a lot of writing, speaking, talking, and action.
Yeah, which is great. So a lot of different kind of avenues to bring experience back into the discussion there. That's great. And good. Diana, hi, morning.
Hi, good morning. My name is Diana Rollan. I got more than 20 years of experience on the wine trade. I am currently the group head of Beverage for the D&D group in London. I am responsible for the purchasing, development, and the innovation side of the products across the different beverage categories for the group. For those who doesn't know D&D is a collection of more than 43 diverse restaurants, bars, including one hotel as well. They are principally based in London, but we have locations in Manchester, in Leeds, in Bristol, New York, Paris. And we got, as a part of that portfolio, we got some iconic restaurants like Angler, Le Pont de la Tour, Côte d'Argent, Bluebird, 20 Stories, to name some.
I think the longest lunch I ever had was at Le Pont de la Tour. It stretched from lunch to late evening, but anyway, that's another story. Then also staying with the hospitality side of the world, but in a slightly different context. So do you want to say?
Yeah, fantastic. Hi, yeah, my name's Ben. I'm currently head sommelier at a restaurant, Moorhall with Rooms. So Mark Birchall's 2 Michelin star restaurant in the northwest in Lancashire, just outside Ormskirk. I've had roughly, I'd say 15, 16 years of kind of mainly hospitality and wine experience spread between the UK and Sweden. and basically always been at a 2-star level. So basically my input will mainly just be from the on-trade and looking at restaurants and how Spain has been working on that side of things.
Excellent, thanks, great. And then over onto the off-trade side, Anna. Hi, Anna.
Hi, Andrew. So I'm Anna Sapungiu. I am the head buyer for Oddbins. So I look after the range of spirits, beers, and wines. Apart from that, I judge at international wine competitions, and I join lovely panels such as today to discuss various topics.
Excellent, thanks. And Sarah. Morning, Sarah.
So I'm one of the buyers for Co-op. So as well as South America, fortified wines, Eastern Europe, I look after Spain as well, which we're not supposed to have favourites, but it quite possibly is mine. So just a bit of context for Co-op is very sort of focused on the convenience sector. So we have a store in every postal district in the UK and represent a 10% market share of the off-trade at the moment. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, great. Well, good to see you all. And first up, I'm going to quickly run through a couple of slides, which will give a little bit of background and context to this webinar. So bear with me while I hopefully click the right buttons. Let's get the screen share up. Right, so this is just to give you a really brief snapshot of where Spain currently is in the UK. So the first one, wine exports to the UK by volume. And we can see in the red there that Spain actually during 2020, over the period of the pandemic, has actually grown its share, its volume share in the UK. So volume, it's the 5th country by volume with a 9.3% market share, and that's increased by 4.2%. So let's move on. In value terms, Spain has an 8% market share, and wine exports have gone up by 5.3% in value during 2020. Just let you linger in case there's anything else you want to pick out there, the other big hitting sort of European countries. And a split of UK off and on trade. So off trade, Spain's number 6 in value, 549 million. And again, we see that figure up, and the volume figure below also up 7%. In the on trade, Spain's 3rd by value, but that has declined in 2019, and volume also declined, but that's for obvious reasons over that period with the on-trade closed for significant periods of time. So Spanish wine, UK exports by category. What's actually happened is that, I don't know if we can see the bottom of that. So GI wine exports increased by 28.6% in value for bottled wines, but there was a greater increase, 128% for wines in bulk. So the higher value wines have increased, but bulk has made up a greater proportion of that increase. Here we've got a snapshot of Spanish vineyards outputs by DO. I think no surprises there. Rioja tops the list. Ribera, followed by Rueda, Jumilla, and we would expect some of that, and Cariñena to be bulk. That'll give you just a rough idea of what Spain's main major DOs are delivering. And one more message from Wines from Spain is Spain counts the largest area of organic vineyards in the world, ahead of Italy and France. And then we've just got a couple of numbers below there, but there's I think that comes as a surprise to some people that Spain is has such a strong focus on organic winemaking, and also we wrote about this last year in Harper's. Actually, it's increasing fast, is my understanding. So you can see the last figure there by 2023, the projected hectarage of organic vineyards, 3 times the coverage it had in 2013, which I think is interesting and to be welcomed. Right, let's see if I can come back out of having messed up the screen share. Pulled us back out with success. There, that was a little bit easier. Okay, so let's I don't know if anyone has any questions about those figures, although I might not actually be best placed to answer them. So let's kick into the discussion. So I think first let's rewind a little bit before COVID hit. The last sort of normal inverted commas year we had, 2019, and let's just get a feel for you and your businesses where Spain was going before COVID hit, how well it was performing for you and your general sense of this market. And or should we begin with the on trade? Should we, Diana? Do you want to give us an idea of how important Spain was for you?
Well, just to put it on context, Spain remain a small category for us if you compare it to other countries like France and Italy. However, I think we have seen over the last couple of years a rise, especially on the premium range of Spain. We were seeing consumers and customers looking beyond Rioja, but looking for something with also recognition in conjunction with value as well. And I think Spain was able to deliver that quite easily compared against other regions like Bordeaux, where prices were going really escalating quite high, or Italy, even Napa Valley. So we've seen it. There was a renaissance, also an interest on other regions within Spain beyond Rioja and Ribera. So we developed listings focusing on smaller appellations like Canary Island, Ribera Sacra, and we've seen it that the customers took those wines quite nicely, and they were interested, and they were just curious to explore a little bit more on that. So it was also a higher demand on different styles of Spanish wines as well, perhaps gravitating more toward lighter styles, and especially we've seen a significant increase on white wines, especially from Galicia and the north of Spain as well. But as I say, still remaining a small percentage of the global wine picture for us, even though we know wine sales were declining a little bit before COVID, and favoring other categories like spirits and non-alcoholic drinks, etc.
Okay, great. So not the biggest category, but one that's reflecting the excitement that's actually coming out of Spain, and customers are responding to that. I mean, Ben, how did that how's Spain been playing out for you at the sort of 2 Michelin star level? Does Diana's sound a familiar picture or something?
Yeah, definitely. I'm basically going to echo pretty much everything that Diana said. I mean, 2019, to be fair, I was in Sweden at the time. I came back to the UK January 2020, so I didn't have very much time to play around with the list before kind of restaurants all kind of shut down. When I started at Moorhall, Spain was not a major part of the list. I think now that I had a little bit of time with it, it's definitely going to become more of a major part of the list. And definitely echoing those thoughts of guests who are a lot more interested in other regions outside of Rioja now. I mean, traditionally, the UK market, I'm going to say Rioja is the one and only Spanish wine that everybody knows. Everyone likes Rioja. But everyone has been, especially over the last few years, definitely seen a massive rise in the Canary Islands. Myself, I really like Bierzo and Ribera Sacra. I think they offer a really interesting, food-friendly, bright, light, refreshing style of red wines that can often work really, really well with food. So yeah, definitely seen a massive increase in that. And I think, yeah, it offers great value for money as well. You look at some super iconic estates of Spain, Vina Tondonia, you can get Vina Tondonia with quite a lot of age on a wine list for only several £100s. Whereas if you're looking at Bordeaux from the same era, you're looking at several £1,000s for the same prestige. So I think that's a really big factor that Spain can offer great value for money, even though these wines are still seen as relatively expensive for Spanish wine. If you compare them to their Bordeaux or their Burgundy or their Napa Valley equivalents, they're great bang for your buck, really. I mean, they're crowd pleasing, and if someone wants something with age and complexity and interest, Spain is definitely a region where you have that option to play around with.
And actually, I think that's, yeah, thanks, Ben. That's a really interesting point. I mean, if also I agree with you about the quality and value, but let's come over to the off trade and see. But I mean, I suppose if Vina Tondonia is on it's only hundreds, then you can always forgo the food and have an incredibly pleasurable experience. Let's be honest.
Exactly.
But joking aside, yeah, Anna, so what's the Oddbins experience with Spain? How much had you been investing in it?
It's I mean, it's been so dynamic. Spain as a country has been really working hard the last few years through its producers and offerings. So for us, it has been growing prior to the pandemic, and I feel that a few tweaks have happened during the pandemic, but it's almost a continuity of a very interesting and growing trend. So within Rioja, which without a doubt, it's over 50% of our sales, the change in style, the fresher approach to it has benefited the category alongside the more premium, the single vineyard and the fine wine side of things. So that's kind of carried through. But at the same time, I always compare Spain a little bit with Italy has done with the Primitivos and all the Puglia style, where it's such a sweet spot. And Spain has come with its kind of humia, fun and interesting value, great value. And also the Cariñanas and Campo de Borja Grenache and Grenache blends. So they've capitalized on that kind of sub 10 pounds, really well made, juicy, rich, depending what the growing variety is. So that's done really well alongside the Rioja and change.
So if you the actual the sweet spot, there are wines that sneak in under the £10 mark and really deliver on some individuality, some character. I mean again, just me as a consumer. I mean that's what I would look for from, and Spain would be one of my go-tos there. So and do that value continue then up to sort of 20, 30, 40?
It does, absolutely, but you have to go into Rioja and Ribera in other places. But I think it's nice just to see that it covered this quite clearly, and it doesn't try and show, it's not trying to how should I say, it's not trying to be something else. It's what is generally Spain is good at, and its strengths are being quite clearly shown.
Okay, and Sarah, to bring you in, because it's going to be interesting to learn from the co-op's perspective, because obviously as a multiple, as a supermarket, it's a very different sort of arena to sell in.
Yep.
Can't necessarily delve into all of these sort of funky and off-piste and wonderful things that are coming up. So how do you filter all this excitement that's been surrounding Spain into your range?
It's been quite interesting because if I go back a couple of years, when we looked at our total Spanish buyers, 2/3 of them only ever bought Rioja, and we weren't seeing them break out of that at all. However, I am starting to see people more willing, and it's part of some of the things that I'm sure we'll be discussing, these other trends around organic sustainability, new grape varieties, new origins, that people are starting to branch out of that. Also, we've seen historically it's been an older shopper and a more traditional shopper buying into Spain, but increasingly we're seeing much more younger shoppers coming through, and I think that's really key when we look at, for example, at the growing trend of organics. There's some interesting data from the IGD suggesting that 55% of people between 18 and 24, so a key category of people we want to bring into wine, are saying that is one of their key priorities for where they want to be buying things, and I think that's something that Spain can offer really well at the moment. And also seeing growth, dramatic growth really in white Spain performance, so it's moving away from this idea that it's sort of traditional sector for heavier reds. So Albarino sales for us, for example, have grown 45% year on year, so even when you take out the COVID impact, that's phenomenal growth, and shows just how well it's performing.
I think, isn't it a thing with Spain that if you compare it with the other big hitting neighbours in Europe, France and Italy, if Spain had commensurate white sales as its red sales, it would really be steamrolling ahead. So that's really interesting to hear that the whites are coming up, and we all know those lovely wines from green Spain and elsewhere that there's some really wonderful stuff out there. Yeah,
it's also never in a vacuum as well. So I think when we look at in the context of the problems coming out of New Zealand and shortage of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, for me there's an opportunity for regions like Rueda to be offering something of that style to a consumer that might normally have gone to New Zealand, and sort of draw some of those shoppers into Spain instead.
Yeah, it was actually interesting looking at those figures earlier, how high Rueda is actually up the list in terms of volumes of export. I hadn't quite clocked, so that was a good refresher and a reminder. Okay, well, I want to so I think we've sort of defined where Spain is at, or has been at, and I think we've identified excitement around it, and want to dive sort of slightly deeper into the emerging regions, new origins, the varieties, etc., but also how well that is likely to carry forward, how it has carried forward through 2020, and can Spain pick up on that again? I mean, Sumi, I think, is it fair to say that there was a real buzz? I felt there was a real buzz around Spain, and has been. Do you think, how well is it likely to continue that momentum? It's a little bit of a crystal ball question, I suppose, but
I think Spain has got a lot of things running for it at the moment. Historical, tradition, long-standing prestige issue, with Rioja being one of the very key established regions for them. And for my private clients, and obviously in the last few months with COVID, it's some of them have bigger families with older kids, kids who are adults now. I think Spain offers that pretty consolidated solution. As Sarah was saying, there's Albarino. It's very youthful, it's juicy, it's fresh, as Anna also put across. It reaches out to the younger generation very easily. So for my clients, it's just like, let's focus on Spain, let's get a little variety. So the older people, the baby boomers, can have their bit, and the youngsters can enjoy their bit. So it has really catered to a wider segment, and all to do also with the pricing, because there's under 10, there is over 10 with quality, under 10 with quality as well, and then you have the the primo stuff with Rioja, and a new emerging demand that I have seen from Ribera del Duero with interested and curious customers who want to know about Vega Sicilia, how it's performing in the Livex. I think that is really catching on for Spain. Because it is now at par with Italy, and probably way ahead than France in terms of an investment product for fine wine collectors. So I'm seeing both ends of the spectrum, and both of them kind of thriving well together. Another key element that I'm seeing also is in the demand for sherry, which was picking up even before COVID. But I think it's just a thrust that COVID has put through, which has really come out vibrantly to sherry. Again, a style which is very diverse. You've got the dry range, and then you've got the medium sweet sherries. Caters to kind of, it just shows the diversity and how that kind of goes on with the strength of the region to be able to reach out to wider customer base. I think that's been a very strong point for me. So everyone knows Spain. I mean, whoever I talk about, they'll either bring out Rioja or Ribera del Duero, or they'll say, oh, by the way, Albarino, I love that grape. So it's just to see the positiveness that's growing. Apart from that, my customers in the UK who used to travel to Europe and Spain, I think they find La Mancha very value driven. Again, very juicy wines, easy to drink, social wines as well. But they have that element of driving every kind of taste palette through. So even for a fine wine connoisseur, I think these wines have that appeal, that elegance that really comes through to kind of entice all ranges. Yeah.
So there's also a sense that people are beginning to connect the dots, because I always felt perhaps in the past that something like Vega Sicilia almost sort of stood alone. It was almost a brand in itself, not necessarily of Spain, and no one had ever heard of Ribera del Duero, for example. So, but you feel that's more integrated, and people connecting the dots, and also recognizing the breadth of Spain's offer. I mean, does anyone else want to pitch in on that? And I've got an audience Q&A, which I'll bring up in just a sec. But Anna, I think you're on mute, Anna.
All I would add, I agree with everything that has been said. I would add that the fact that it's, Spanish wines are unstuffy. There is something really approachable about them, and then I think Spain is playing this card really well, and it's obviously working with the younger consumers and the price point that we've discussed. The other thing is organic. Organic has been growing. And in the wines that I'm seeing, they're incredibly good value for the organic category and really well made. The label are very catchy. And to the other, to push the organic envelope even more, it's vegan, it's natural. I've seen some lovely natural wines from Spain, more so from other countries. So, and we are at a time when people are, conscious about everything, whether it's health or environment, so I think if Spain continues to play this role, will do more so for the future.
It's possibly a good place to bring you in, Sarah, as well, on the organic front. I mean, looking at Spain compared with the sort of ethical and sustainable focus that the co-op typically has. How does Spain compare in your mind as you said you might be slightly biased towards Spain, but try and ignore that, compare with the other countries, the other producing countries you're dealing with?
I think, for example, in regions like Rioja, there's not been historically a big focus on organics, and even perhaps bit of resistance from producers, or challenge that it's not something they would tend to work with. It's climatically perhaps a bit more challenging for them. I've now seen that completely shift, and I mean, we've brought in an organic Rioja, which is our first one, for example. But it's not beyond organics. I think there's been some quite interesting shifts towards communicating other signs of sustainability to the consumer. So sort of focus on old vines, which is obviously a huge part of Spain's viticultural heritage. Wines that specifically target reduced water use, and working with growers to dry farm the vines and communicate that on the labels to consumers as well. And to Anna's point, we're not quite as far as natural wines at Co-op, but I do a no sulfur added wine from Navarra, and I think that Spain is well placed with it being so geographically close to us to be able to do sort of slightly more adventurous wines for a supermarket setting.
Yeah, no, great. Do these factors work in Ben at sort of 2 Michelin dining level? Do just similar cues kind of engage customers? Obviously, you're in a serious hand sell situation if you wish to be.
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, yes, they do. You will always get that guest, oh, I only drink organic, or oh, I only drink biodynamic, and you have to have answers for them. I would say as well, it's quite interesting looking at maybe not just organics, but the whole movement to maybe selling things like in Rioja, you see people like Telma Rodriguez now really pushing more kind of single vineyard aspects, which has never really been a forte of Rioja. Rioja is just, it's a region, it just makes a wine. Whereas Telma was like, well, actually, we've got these super old vineyards that are doing really interesting things, but each vineyard is different and has an aspect of terroir. So there's definitely those kind of stories. I think carrying on things like Spain have got some really just interesting characters in their winemakers as well. So for me, what sells wine a lot more, especially as you said, we're more of a hand sell. It's a lot more of a personal interaction. So it's a lot more that kind of story behind a wine. Are they doing something different? Why are they doing that? And a lot of them are doing it, yeah, to be sustainable. But a lot of for me, a lot of the best producers aren't necessarily doing it to have that organic sticker on the bottle, which often in a supermarket or a wine shop setting will help sell a wine. For them, they don't really like the bureaucracy behind it and the fact that it's really expensive and there's a lot of paperwork, when in fact, they've been working this way for generations.
Yeah.
And they don't need somebody to tell them that, oh, well done, you're working without chemicals. They're like, well, I've always done it this way, so why am I going to change it? And they just kind of slip under the radar a little bit. And if you've got a nice story and you've got a good kind of aspect to sell and they've got a selling point, I find that almost a bigger driving factor than having certifications or having like stickers on your labels. But yeah,
I suppose this is I mean, I'm not in marketing or from a marketing background, but I guess this is always the challenge, isn't it? There's not one market. It's a very fragmented market, so you need to sort of segment messages for different channels and so on. And that would be coming from, say, wines from Spain or wines from Rioja, whoever. But then also you as a seller in your own environment. Obviously, there'll be certain cues which work for you and your guests, and their stories, as you say, Spain abounds. I mean, I don't know, we should explore that a little bit, because I've often in discussions and panels that I've hosted or been involved with Spain, you get sort of a sort of Rioja here, and it's this massive and wonderful presence which has long been known. A large number of consumers know the word Rioja. That's fantastic. And then it's almost like, and then there's the rest of Spain, and it's exciting and it's cool, and all the young hip people are getting into, as you say, Bierzo and Ribera Sacra and all the rest of it. But the innovation that's been coming out of Rioja, I think, is really, really interesting. And do you feel that that's understood enough, and that also links back into what's going on in the rest of Spain? I'm not sure. Is there a question in there? What's the relationship between Rioja and the rest of Spain?
Well, on that point that you mentioned about the innovation and is it being understood, I would say by the majority of British wine drinkers, probably not. Because, okay, in Rioja, you've always had two camps. You've had like old school, kind of really old American oak barrels, and it's the way it is. And you've got kind of the new school with smaller oak barriques that make kind of a little bit more heavier, richer, rounded, kind of juicier Riojas. And that's kind of what people tend to gravitate towards. Like they drink Rioja because it's safe. They know what they're going to get. And then when you've got this kind of innovation or more terroir or single vineyard kind of expressions that is a lot more about the grape and the actual region as a personality, it can almost be a little bit confusing or scary to kind of grasp and understand, because it is so different to what they're used to. And then I think that kind of goes on to the rest of Spain. Like, yeah, you've got sherry, and like obviously the British have always had quite a close tie with sherry and the sherry industry in general. But then when you look at actually what sherry was before it kind of became sherry, with just kind of like slightly oxidized Palomino finos or aged under a floor but without fortification, like cut fortified, they do some amazing kind of unfortified Palominos that have had a little bit of floor or a little bit of extra age. And they're super, super interesting. But when you try and kind of sell them towards guests, it gets a little bit confusing or scary for them, because it's not a sherry and it's not an Albarino. So what is it? And it kind of becomes a little bit of that kind of gray territory that I can kind of get over, because I have the time to spend with a guest and I can offer them a taste and we can talk about it and we can say, it works really well with your next dish, give it a go. If you don't like it, we'll change it up. But if you're in a supermarket or a shop, I imagine that's quite a different kind of ball game, really.
Yeah. So I mean, we sort of touched on this before, though, didn't we? So there are definitely ripe hunting ground for, you know, if you like, sommelier / indie merchant wines, which are on the volcanic slopes on islands, or you know, off-piste styles from the sherry region and so on. So there's quite a lot to be found there. I mean, Sumi, is there almost too much from Spain in a sense? I mean, we haven't mentioned Cava yet either, and then we've got a question from Joshua Castle, who's saying we'd be interested to hear the panel's thoughts on Cava. So we've got massive sparkling. A massive sort of sparkling production, which is really prominent and people know. We've got Rioja, we've got all of the emerging regions, and let's not forget obviously Ribera and to a degree Priorat, which are obviously highly established quality regions. What have I missed? And sherry. So we've got all these sort of different facets going on. Is it just a bit of a sort of confusing jumble of things, and you have to sort of pick and mix? And I don't know.
Yes and no. I think I think where Spain really addresses to consumers as a country is the price. It doesn't, I mean, it has the capacity to go into the extreme icon category as well, but generally it has always stayed within the entry level to kind of luxury, but not over the top as well market. And more than that, I just feel the consumers now are wanting more. Things may have changed during COVID, but people are looking at variety now. I mean, the same thing you can say with English sparkling wines. I mean, are people getting confused? No, I think they are happy to try out different wines. They want to try out different price scales as well. Cava is an entity which I feel, because of all the changes that it has gone through, may have kind of lost a bit of the touch with the consumer, because at this point of time, we're living in the UK. I mean, we can't leave this place. So English wines are very, very on our face right now through the online media, and they're competing with champagne, and people are not kind of celebrating to the level of kind of champagne kind of victory defeat at this point of time. They want something more accessible, something that they can pick up saying, gosh, I'm done with my meeting on a Friday. I just want to open something very easy. I think that is a big gap where Cava really needs to fill in and say that, hey, you know what, we're there, we have the complexity, and we can address consumers who are able to, you know, with the price, with the accessible price as well. It's happening a lot more probably in Europe, but I think in the UK, the general frame is, I haven't seen much of demand in terms of Cava, although I know there's been a lot happening in the community in Spain to bring it all out. But in COVID specifically, I think there was just so much of things about English wines, and, you know, grower champagnes came up as well right now. And obviously we've got Prosecco that's also kind of trying to keep up with the latest innovations in the market. So yes, to that extent, there are certain sectors which I feel that there has been a lot lot of dynamism, a bit maybe too much to handle for COVID. But I think sherry stands its own. It stands on its own only because it has this various category, and you know, come on trade mixologists who've come out with these really zingy ways of making you know, cocktails. I think that has kind of created a separate class for sherry, which definitely needs to continue going ahead. Yes, it does it's good that it caters to an older generation too, but it also kind of now makes itself appealing to the youngsters. But Rioja is definitely on the mind, and the good thing is that sometimes it's nice to have one key category rather than like in France, you've got Bordeaux, Burgundy, and then the comparison starts. Here, Rioja stands on its own with Ribera del Duero, but obviously the grape is somewhat similar. The combinations may be different, but the expressions may be different. However, it's not a confusion in the mind of the customer. They'll say, what does Ribera, is it able to handle, are you able to give me a good value? Yes, you can get value even in Ribera del Duero. It's not about, you know, Pingus and Vega Sicilia. So it does not create to my from what I've seen from my customers to that extent. But yes, I think where the confusion may lie for Spain is in the sparkling wine category, which I think really needs to be bolstered, and kind of, especially for the UK market, for people to start saying, okay, now I want Cava, I want to do a lot more than just English sparkling wines or champagne or Proseccos. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Let's stick with Cava for a second and just get a quick taster, as it were, from both on and off trade. I mean, Diana, Cava, does it work for you? I mean, sparkling wine has been one of the few growth categories in wine over a few years. Spain makes a lot of Cava, and it makes some fantastic Cava. It seems to have sort of shot itself in the foot a bit for years. I mean, let's not dwell on the past, but bumping along on the bottom shelf in supermarkets. Is it rescuing itself with all the work that's going on to elevate, you know, quality wines and so on?
Unfortunately for us, no. As much as I love the category and as much as I love the value that Cava offers, I think the message of the category hasn't come through in the way that was expected by the DO perhaps, and customers don't demand Cava. We don't sell that category across our outlets, and those who adventure to list the sales minimum. It is pity because it's a blessing category. Sparkling sales are going up within to a category that is decreasing. In general, you know, people will go for Prosecco with the new Rosé Prosecco, you know, sales in that category are just going really high. And as Sumi was mentioning before, you know, English sparkling wines as a category is growing significantly and taking away part of the share that Cava could have on the sparkling category for me. So unfortunately, Cava is not working for us as much as I you know, I don't want it to recognize it, because I feel there's great value in that particular style of wines.
So there's definitely some work to be done there. Well, there is work that's ongoing, and obviously it takes time for messages to come through. I mean, Anna, do you have a similar or a differing experience with the Cava category?
Unfortunately, I resonate with the rest of the panel. It hasn't been doing well for us. It's been tanking actually, Cava, but I wouldn't want to dwell on this because I think there is an opportunity here. Prosecco, you know, you can sell as much Prosecco, but after a while people want something else, and Cava could have a comeback. However, a lot of work needs to be done on finding its feet, really, on finding its personality. It's got a bit of an identity crisis at the moment. I think the opportunity lies in the angle on rosé a little bit, or organic, but also in making it more accessible and more engaging with the end consumer. And it could be through the labels, it could be through the brands, the way they look, it could be through the style. But yeah, it's got to be a strong effort, and more importantly, an overall effort for all the producers, because at the moment I find that everyone is doing its own thing, and it's confusing, and that's where the identity crisis comes from.
Okay, oh great. Well, thanks for the reply. So still some work to be done there on behalf of by Cava and Cava producers. So just shift it slightly to looking ahead now, and I had an interesting question from Matthew de Suter. Well, a comment into question. And for those who don't know, Matthew is part of De Suter and James, a small to Spanish specialist importer, bringing in smaller to medium-sized wineries. So very much on the sort of artisanal and craft end, some fantastic wines. Now he's concurring with a lot of what you're all saying about the excitement, as you might expect, but he's also saying perhaps more emphasis needs to be placed on the generational shift in Spain. So I think I'll sort of turn that around. We've got younger producers coming in. You can argue that's a story going on all the way around the world, but these generally speaking are the people that are doing a lot to find and revitalize old vines, to create fantastic wines, to put them in bottles, often with really quite cool, eye-catching labels. There are many more women on the winemaking scene than there used to be. Do you feel that this change is sort of filtering through? Has some way to go? What sort of impact is that having, and how can that help you with your Spanish categories into the future? Who might want to pick that up? Sumi, any thoughts? Sorry, does any of that make sense?
I can only speak on behalf of the clients that I work with. I think there is a whole lot of opportunity that Spain can capitalize, but having said that, Spain has a lot right now that is going in its favor. We are undergoing a bit of a transition right now in terms of, there has been a slightly different behavior in terms of what has happened in COVID, but along the lines which should have happened and which was happening for Spain in terms of being able to reach out to consumers more directly. I think that is an area that I just feel that Spain can do really, really well with. And that is an area where niche producers, smaller producers can actually really can capitalize on, because there are now consumers who want to know more, and you have social media, you have digitalization, and there are some very, very savvy producers who are able to reach out directly to consumers, and I think there's a whole opportunity here to follow the American model of opening up mailing lists. And because there are smaller wines coming, biodynamics, I think these are key to address through those lines to consumers who may be knowing, but may not maybe at a stage where they're saying, right now I'm COVID, not really thinking about it, but I will. But now is the time to really capitalize on that and get all of their back-end and technological platform ready to be able to reach out directly once things go on to normal. The other thing I think is also in terms of wine tourism, I think which really people are going to come back with a vengeance. People are just waiting to get out. And Spain has always been very authentic about its message, which it should continue. There has been no confusing messages being sent through. It is what it is, and I love that about Spain. They don't try to be anything different. That message again needs to really be honed in through more channels open through tourism and subscriptions and just reaching out. And there is a whole potential of that happening. I think timing is just right that we just take it and just jump on it.
Yeah, so it's just seize carpe diem, seize the opportunity, seize the day right now, seize the fish. Diana, does that make sense for you? And yeah.
Yes, definitely. It's no doubt that Spain is going through a massive wine culture in general, and there is opportunity to bring a little bit more of that diversity and the quality along, these new indigenous grape varieties, the local traditions, and the new winemakers who wanted to do something different and unique. And now is the moment to market about it, to keep shouting about it. I think within the on-trade, there's been a lot being done before COVID with alternatives like piñateros, where we have access to smaller producers and being able to rediscover new regions and new grape varieties. And I think they are on a path of a self-discovery within Spain that is bringing a lot of potential across multi different opportunities as I said before, in terms of regions and varieties and different styles of wines.
Okay, great. And yeah, absolutely. And another thing that sort of lies to this is stylistically, obviously you wouldn't be supporting and championing Spain with your lists if you're going to be taking wines that are up scratch, up speed, that are excellent. Do you feel this is across the board stylistically, or are there still a lot of hits and misses? Is there some way to go? So what I'm thinking about collectively Spain's offer out there in the market, you sort of need to achieve a critical mass of at least good quality level, don't you, from the entry level up. If there are too many misses, then it can drag the whole down, if that makes sense. So is Ben, you're nodding. Do you have any thoughts on that? How is Spain doing well enough across the board?
Generally speaking, I would say yes. A lot of the more stuff that people are discovering is really well made and is really interesting, but there is that risk, especially with Spain is kind of almost like the new kind of Loire of France. It's the kind of the hotbed of natural, funky, cloudy, interesting, volatile wines that in the right market can be fantastic. But if that's not exactly what you're looking for, it's definitely going to kind of scare you off new regions. So like if you were all for trying something new, but then you go to the Canary Islands and you start picking out some more of the more obscure stuff because you've heard the Canaries are like the new hot thing, so you're going to go and try some wine from there, and you just don't pick the right one, you're going to kind of wipe out everything from the Canaries or the Balearics. Like you look at Mallorca, there's some fantastic wines in Mallorca, but there's also some really funky weird stuff, which if you like that, great, but if that's not what you're looking for, you're going to think, is this what everybody in Mallorca's making? Because if it is, I'm not going to drink any of it ever again. So I think there is a risk that some of the wines aren't quite, not necessarily up to par, but not kind of what people might necessarily be expecting. And that might be a generational thing. It might be whether the way where they're sourcing their wine, is it just a badly picked wine for our wine list that doesn't just quite fit, but it's a cool area, so we should really have something from that region, so let's just pick something and it's the only thing they had, or whether that is actually just bad winemaking because it's a bit of a boom.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. So there's a sort of danger that you want especially with a more individual style of wine, it needs to end up in the right place in the right hands, I think is what we're saying. Otherwise, someone might have a little bit of a shock if they think they're in the market for something that's going to taste like Rioja, and in fact, it is this sort of vervy, nervous, tension-infused kind of something grown with old vines on a volcanic island, etc., etc., and it's just not going to be what they expect. Yeah, exactly.
But I think, just sorry to jump in, just to add to it, it's not to be discouraged. It's about communication and those respective producers communicating within the channel of distribution and the end consumer of what their product is. I think it's to be encouraged, all this diversity, though, given the quality there. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm all for a little bit of funk, and as Andrew said, a super nervy old vine listan grown on a volcano, and it's like super mineral and edgy. But yeah, it's definitely down to that communication, whether that is from a sommelier, whether that is from your local independent wine retail, whether that's just from the producers or the importers themselves, and saying like, if you are going to distribute this wine, make sure you distribute it to the right people. You kind of almost have like a duty of care over that wine to make sure it kind of ends up in the right hands and continues to kind of be beneficial to that producer or to that region or to that country in terms of reputation.
I think that when it comes to the, sorry, Andrea, but when it comes to the market, UK market has been ready to accept that on other countries like Italy, where that diversity and the range and consumers were not scared of that. Why cannot Spain also take advantage of that trend as well?
Yes, and I think, well, I think it has been, hasn't it? But it's I suppose this is how it better hones it, and especially now, with hopefully in the UK at least the worst of the pandemic behind us, with things reopening, as we said at the beginning. It's so perhaps a question then is just looking at time as well, and we'll welcome any more questions from the audience out there. But maybe sort of by way of moving towards a kind of summary, if we could just go around and ask you how you think Spain can put its best foot forward, perhaps in your given channel, in terms of trying to condense everything we could talk all day about all this sort of multifaceted country, but how it condenses down into sort of simple messages. What is strongest? Is it young new generation winemakers? Is it funky discoveries? Is it old vines? Is it the organic side of things? Is it the fact it brings this sort of triumvirate of sherry and cava and still wines together? So I don't know, Sarah, from your point of view, in the sort of multiple channel, what is the strongest sort of selling point on Spain?
I think Spain for us continues to be a category that has a higher average spend than our total wine average spend, and I think that's to be celebrated, that it's a category that draws people that are prepared to premiumize, and that's a trend that we're continuing to see build during COVID. One of the behaviours that I believe will stick is this people cooking more and dining in more at home, and that idea of wanting something a bit more special and a bit more niche. So although I think you can there's a lot of opportunity to drive in, whether it's sort of Graffiano Rioja or sort of higher altitude fresher styles, because compared to sort of, I've been tasting 16% Malbecs, for example, and don't worry, I'm not listing them, but just to put it in context of the higher alcohol levels we see everywhere, and yet Spain has that breadth of 60 years, a huge spread of altitudes that it can draw on to create these fresher, elegant styles, which I think is what consumers want, and more interesting wines with heritage, with stories, and because I do believe even in my sector we can definitely communicate those stories to consumers, and it is what they want to enjoy at home rather than something that's a bit more just bland and generic. I think Spain has a lot of interest to offer to that.
And just to quickly jump in there, that's really interesting. Has that, forgive me, I'm not sure how long you've been with the co-op or how far back you can give us sort of figures of reference for, but you're saying Spain ratchets up a higher spend. Has that been the case for a while, and what specific wines are driving that?
I think it's helped by having the quality tiers within Rioja, so it's sort of a clear trade up that the customers can understand that they're going to buy Reserva or Gran Reserva, and they understand that that is a step up in their minds. And I'm not saying it is necessarily a step up in quality, but there is a hierarchy that they can get their heads around. So I think it's been driven by that typically, but I am also seeing people spending more in white Spain, and certainly within other areas of Spain as well. So and that continues to be the case.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And going back to, we were talking about altitudes and terrains. I think I'm right in saying that Spain is the second most mountainous country in Europe after Switzerland, something like that, which we possibly all know. Anna, what's the same sort of question, really, through Oddbins, your style of operation. What's perhaps the sort of strongest simple message that would help you to engage customers with your Spanish portfolio? Is there one? Is it possible?
Well, I would focus now on the next few months, because we were talking about coming out of lockdown slowly and things opening up. I would say, summer is coming up. Capitalize on the white wines. Yes, we sell a lot of Albareños and Rioja Baixas, but the prices are creeping up a little bit, and people want something else underneath as well. And Sarah, I think you mentioned Rueda. I absolutely agree with you. Good, well-made Verdejos and Rueda specifically are an opportunity and offer that point of difference to Sauvignon Blanc. So I would definitely focus on that as well.
Excellent, and thanks, Anna. And Ben, in the fine dining arena, is anything you do slightly differently, or is it a case of sort of echoing what's been said?
I think there's definitely some form of echo there. Definitely. I mean, I have a little bit more kind of a chance to push things that maybe shops or supermarkets might not be able to, whether that's through a wine pairing or whether that's through people are a little bit more willing to experiment when it's only going to be a glass of wine with one dish. And okay, if it's not their favorite, they haven't just bought an entire bottle of wine that they don't enjoy or they don't like. So that definitely gives me a little bit of scope to play around with regions that people might not necessarily be familiar with in Spain. So I can always go to kind of Grados and play with some Grenache, or I can go to Ribera Sacra, or I can go to kind of down in the south and play with Baubal and different red grapes that people might never have heard of or experienced that style from Spain. So from that point of view, yeah, I definitely have more of an ability to kind of play around and tailor and do things. And as we said, Spain has this kind of excitement about it all around. I think white Spain is also quite interesting from a restaurant point of view. I mean, like Albarino is the Riesling for people that are scared of Riesling. Maybe that kind of middle-aged generation that are now petrified of the name Riesling because of Black Sour and Blue Nun and whatever. You can quite easily sell them Albarino because it gives all the benefits of a really crisp Alsace or German Riesling, but without the name Riesling, which is a really nice way of kind of selling those wines. I think the only thing that holds white Spanish wines back a little bit is when you're in Spain, you drink a lot of Rías Baixas, you drink a lot of kind of really crisp, mineral, fresh, fruity white wines. But because people have this, they're naturally drawn to words like Rioja. And as soon as you have a white Rioja, no white Rioja is what people generally expect of Spanish white wine. Generally, they tend to be a little bit more oxidative and rich and nutty and round. So like outside of the really fresh, crisp Spanish whites and sherry, I think Spanish white needs a little bit more of an explanation before it's really kind of understood and accepted. But again, I have the benefit of being able to do that. So for me, I can list a little bit more weird and wonderful Spanish white wines and kind of get away with it.
Great. I think you're doing that at D&D, aren't you, Diana? I mean, is your prediction that the excitement, all the excitement that we talked about, will basically leapfrog COVID and continue with Spain?
I really have high hopes on that, and I think, as Ben said, we have a different platform to communicate that to our customers. I think with interactions, direct interactions through those pairings, we can get away by selling completely different styles and range of Spanish wine. For me, I think the key here is to focus on the diversity. Definitely, is far more beyond Tempranillo, is far more beyond Ribera and Rioja, and within to those regions. A lot of things are happening at the moment. Spain is very vast, and there is a lot of things on recover local traditions and local grape varieties to bring it into, and through different offerings and playing around with different styles of wines on by the glass, you can also help consumers and guests to get to know more of these different styles. There is a lot of younger, smaller producers that need our support, and because they're very dynamic and talented, and they can also create those delicious and individual styles of wines that bring a different sense of place to the Spanish wine scene.
Fantastic, thanks. And I realize actually we've this session obviously is sort of in place in a sense of the annual Wines from Spain tasting in London. So hence we've been very UK focused, which is great. But Sumi, just before we kicked off, obviously you have you have quite an international vision, I think. Do you think we'd be hearing similar comments and similar conversation about Spain sort of elsewhere? Is the sort of excitement, all the things we've heard about, is that generally sort of understood internationally, or are people looking at Spain?
Yeah, I think I pretty much know that fine wine consumers in India are very open to some of the established brand names in Rioja, CBNE, La Rioja Alta. They know about these wines. Rioja, as I said, as a region, has really reached out quite well in that aspect. There's a lot more happening now in China as well. Singapore is a huge market where fine wines and Rioja and now Vega Sicilia has been occupying a lot of interest as well, galvanizing a lot more. And I think the whole point comes in what is the best value for money. Bordeaux, people have done that in 2000. Now what's next that'll give us that same level of association with brand, and that's where there is a huge potential for fine wine producers. Coming back to the UK, I think I know a lot of the Asians from my community will want to go out. I think immediately we may not be able to travel, outside our zones, but restaurants will open in first, and that's where I think the on-trade needs to really capitalize on that, and people would have come back with a level of opinions that they would have made in the year. I think it's just using that opinion to provide something more, but they would also want to be led So that's where a sommelier's education will add a lot of value, because they'll say, hey, I have had Rioja, what else can you deal with? And I think that something different is where the sommelier route, once restaurants open, which will be pretty much in the next few weeks, I think will be very, very key to garner that interest. And then going forward, hopefully June, July, if things open up across countries in Europe, I think that's where Spanish winemakers have to really catch up and reach out. And you know, they should really say, okay, we are establishing our wine tourism, because people, as Benjamin said, they might not be open to tasting a funky wine in the UK, but the minute they have had that bridge that's done by the on-trade, and they travel to Spain, they'll say, oh, by the way, I did have it in this lovely Michelin-rated restaurant. Do you have any more of that? So I think it's a gradual transition. I think we've lost that ability, and it's obviously, you know, we're all humans. We're bound by habits, and I think it's just building up that connection is extremely important, and that's where on-trade, off-trade, all has to work together along with the producer front. I know that for Sarah, I think supermarkets have really been on the face, taking over the entire load of the COVID sales. But I think it's here that now they can also make use of opportunities of natural winemaking, maybe to introduce a bottle here or there just as a tasting, just for those consumers who said, you know, I've tasted all the entire range of Co-op, what's there more are there? And vegan wines is one of those that stands out really, really solid for Co-op in terms of, you know, what else can they do that can capture other interests of consumers. So yes, I think the transitioning is extremely important. There is a big place, a lot of things to happen. It's just getting the consumers back into that road of you know, being led and being entertained, being educated. I think by now I would like to say that they're wanting to get out there. They want to taste more.
Yeah, and I certainly hope so. I mean, I think it's possibly, it's going to be a question of how long rather than whether consumers get out there and we all get back into a greater sort of sense of normality. So it's just bridging that time at the moment now, isn't it? So it's, but I mean, certainly I sense a lot of optimism out there. You know, looking ahead despite the hardship that many have been through. Well, I think if anyone else would like to add any comments, we've covered a lot of ground. And I think as an opening session, we've certainly expressed our enthusiasm for Spain and explored at least many of the facets, exciting facets that the country's offering. Just whole bundle of different exciting reasons to go to Spain. So we'll look forward, Sarah, to the first Spanish natural wine on the Co-op shelves soon. And otherwise, does anyone else want to jump in with a final parting comment?
I would just say that I think rather than thinking, oh God, when will this year or when will this COVID thing be over, I think it's been a really positive thing in many senses, in the fact that it's bringing people in to spend more, to try new things, to branch out of their comfort zone, to bring new shoppers into categories like sherry. And I think hopefully we can work together to continue that momentum really and bring more for the future of Spain going forward after we're all back to normal.
Excellent. Well, Sarah, thank you very much. And I think on that note,
there's one question by Pauline here, which is in the chats about UK being instrumental as a market to establish wine reputation. Do you feel it is going to be still the case, or do you think producers are shifting away from the UK because of the recent changes? I would like to think that it's a very interesting question because obviously of all the issues with Brexit and the implications that are now coming. In terms of emerging markets, I do see Asia as a big potential for a market that is getting to be quite savvy and educated. I would like to think that producers may kind of give it a second thought, saying, you know, if it's going to be so difficult in the UK, we've already made a mark there. Why don't we start focusing a lot more into this sector, which has a huge potential and just is waiting to open up. Yes, to answer the question, Pauline, yes, to some extent, I think it'll be an opportunity for markets outside Europe to really capture in on, because everybody is facing logistics issue in terms of cross-cultural, or, you know, even within Europe, there are issues of, so I think it's going to open up an opportunity where people will eventually get over this particular, you know, situation that we are facing in terms of logistics and costs and paperwork. Things are bound to open. I would like to think so, and it obviously will create an opportunity. So yeah, it's about finding out what are those areas where producers can see where they can able to, you know, go through and walk through and be able to say, okay, we've got this experience going, now we can capture another market. Absolutely. There is a huge potential for emerging markets such as Asia to take over.
Yeah, I think that's yes. Forgive me, that's Pauline Vickard. The question I hadn't scrolled down actually, Pauline. So, but thanks, Sumi, for picking up on that. Excellent. Okay, well, on that positive note, like to wrap up. Very much like to thank you, the audience, for taking the time out to join us. As I say, do go on to Foods and Wines from Spain website if you'd like to see how this series of webinars, masterclasses, and indeed those tastings I mentioned develop and when they are. Otherwise, great to see you all panelists. Thanks, you're the ones that make it happen. So Sumi, pleasure. Diana, good to see you. Ben, good to see you again. Anna, it's been a while, but great to see you. And Sarah, thank you very much again for joining us all.